our panel talk. Let's welcome back the other speakers. And Kostas will be the panel host. And the audiences, you can type your questions in QA box directly. Okay.
So I am I'm the panelist and the paneler at the same time. I'm the questioner and the questionee, and I'm the answeree and the answerer at the same time. Like, do you understand what I'm talking about? Are you getting it? This is exactly what I'm going through, okay? You, John, you said, I'm disappointed that I'm not here now. Really? Are you?
No longer. I'm now completely happy because you've explained that I'm there and not there.
60 days. 60 days, and we have another, probably in my case, because I am in the Yangpu district, we were told that probably we're going to stay another 20 days. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know yet. I don't know. It's just,
Kostas,
it's a rumor going on. But the rest of Shanghai is going out. It's okay. And as I said, it's not a bad thing.
You can open a restaurant with all these incredible new foods that you've invented. So this will be a benefit in the long run.
Oh yeah. I'm not buying bread anymore. No bread. We make it ourselves. We make a little baby. It's an amazing experience. I'm telling you. You have to. I mean, it's theoretically you don't get it. You have to be in the position of not knowing what's going to happen. You have to be physically. You have to be there and actually say, okay, what am I going to do now? Or you have to have the infinite time that we have to think. I mean, it's a lot of thinking going on. I mean, I wrote all this stuff in the last few days. I mean, even last night I was writing code. Okay, so it's not like it's like an entertainment that I mean. I'm also entertained. I do a lot of reading and a lot of movies and all this kind of thing. But there's a lot of inspiration to do things because you are with yourself. You're a monk in a way. You know, you're kind of like dealing with yourself all the time. Of course, my wife is on the other room. We have a very big house. But I mean, this idea that you're on your own is very important because it basically self-reflects into this idea of you and yourself. And again, that's the whole point that we're trying to explore in this conference. And we brought this from the very beginning that it's not about AI. It's about AI, but the I is different. It's about imagination. And it's about the lack of common sense. So as Filippo said in the first day, there's something called common sense. And common sense is the thing that we use to judge our existence as humans. Really, at the end of the day, it's all about common sense. Animals don't have common sense. Plants don't have common sense. Objects don't have common sense. We are the only ones who possess that thing. So the question that we're trying to investigate here is whether there is no common sense in the human. In other words, nonsense, but not nonsense, more like a neo-Dada type of nonsense, where the objects are the ones who determine the sense, not us. So that's why we use the word artificial imagination. So I'd like to ask all of you, which means me, because I'm asking, since I'm one of the actors and I mean the panelists and the panelee, how do you define, or what's the difference between human imagination and artificial imagination? And that goes to Mick, because Mick is like very, very, very interested in you and what you're doing. So how do you define artificial imagination?
You made an excellent point in your talk about the Turing test. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand the Turing test. They think that the Turing test has been devised to aid the discovery of artificial imagination or artificial intelligence, when in reality, it's not that at all, I don't think. I think we agree, I hope, that it's about understanding the limits of human interpretation from external things, objects, devices, machinery. And so I think that the unfortunate truth for me ends up being that it's very much humans interpreting the structure and the uncovering of what looks like sense in those things that are around us and interpreting them as imagination or allowing them to inspire us for us to think. I think it's almost impossible for us to understand how to even begin to describe any other kind of interaction. So I say that, I think you're kind of substituting intelligence for imagination, and then in a way falling into a similar trap, potentially. And the intelligence is very hard to define, and we tend to define it very poorly, and that's been a problem for AI research. If we replace it with imagination, we have a similar set of problems.
Right. So you said in your talk, you said that at some point in the beginning, you said that the AI is statistical, probabilistic, and stochastic. And that is not, in a way, conscious in a way. And my question is that when we're dreaming, isn't that exactly what we're doing? Isn't that statistics, basically, of our mind, of the things we did during our whole life? Isn't it probabilistic? Isn't it stochastic?
Yeah.
So isn't a dream really exactly that?
That's a great question. And dreams are one of those things that I've spent an awful long time trying to simulate. I think answering a question of that kind is quite fun. So I'm going to give it a try. I think that if you are trying to describe the processes that go into understanding human dreams in a way which relies on our current methods for calculating meaning in the outside world, including mathematical models, at that point, things already are breaking down. I think, we have a model over here, a set of models which we use to describe the universe, and we can apply them in computation. And that's what we do when we create artificial intelligence systems using computers. We do computation. But computation itself is quite ineffective at describing the universe. And that's why I made reference to Christoph Koch's Feeling of Life itself, in which he argues that awareness can't be computed, consciousness can't be computed. And in it, he leans on similar resources philosophically that you yourself do in your talk, including panpsychism, the notion that these, things, even objects, could have some intelligence. But I would just say that the difficulty hits you again, you can make that decision, but if your model for describing and actually carrying out your measurements is constrained by your understanding of the universe, yet you are the universe, you're already going to lose. Hence, consider Gödel's incompleteness in the same way that Penrose does in The Emperor's New Mind as a starting point for his discussion of consciousness. And that mathematically deriving that something like that is very difficult given the constraints of mathematics.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to introduce one ghost member here, which is Antonino, which is so you know who this person is. He was in the morning panel. He is a physicist, a quantum physicist, and with a lot of kind of like down-to-earth information that, again, I try to poetically put it into the context of our own existence and make it more philosophical. But again, there is a source of information that comes from the actual quantum physics itself. The particles are doing the things they're doing. And when I do the particles that are actually moving around, which are simulating the love triangle story, it's basically trying to do the same thing. I mean, not quantum, but it's basically particles moving around. And yet, as they move around, they produce relationships, which many people would say, yeah, so what? Yeah, they inspire me to write a novel, the second part of the sequel of the cholera thing. It's not that they actually write the story. I mean, most of the GPT-3 are actually writing a story, which makes not a lot of sense to me because it looks like the first experiment where I took the text and I randomly put it into order. And again, one came up as a random event, okay? But the second one is more platonic. There's a form that produces, like there is an interaction of things, and the interaction actually produces the text. And text has been interpreted by me, but the inspiration of the text is only mine. So the quantum, in a way, if you like, is the legal IP belongs to the system, not to me. Okay. And I think that's a very simple thought. I don't know why we make such a big deal out of it and how it has to be legally, and we have to go through the obvious group and how much money they made and the guy, the Robbie and all this kind of thing. It's very simple. The system owns it. It's the system.
I think that's a dangerous and slightly ill thought out conclusion.
I don't know.
I'll say why. I think it's because it's a good supposition, let's think about it properly. There are already legal precedents in the UK for such systems. Famously, the computer game Entombed, which no one could quite figure out how it did its maze generation. No one really knew. And the story is quite amusing, that in order to understand how this maze generation happened, everyone was interviewed, the programmer was tracked down, found out the programmer was drunk and couldn't remember how it worked. And maze generation is a fundamental form of kind of artificial intelligence research, particularly in the 80s. And the idea that this very good, high, robust maze generator appeared in this game led people to think that perhaps the algorithm itself was the author and not the programmer, not the publisher. And laws were passed in the UK to enable the computer program to be thought of as the author. And that's a precedent in the UK. But the truth is, it was then uncovered just last year by a series of mathematicians exactly how the program had been written and how it worked. It's simply that the people couldn't remember. And as a result, the person who was the author simply, there's a very simple AI here. It's not complicated. But the notion is that simply because they had forgotten what they had done meant they no longer owned it. And that's just one example. I think the notion that somehow the algorithms themselves have rights is before humans. I think that is what I principally am objecting to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
I think for artists, the situation is also quite clear. I mean, I mentioned Holly Herndon with the Holly Plus program. She really developed this AI herself called Spawn. And the AI became part of her ensemble that she was working with. So she credited some creativity, but then for her, it was always clear that she was the one making decisions regarding, the final output of a vocal piece. So I think for them, or also for other artists, they really used AI as a tool.
But is it? Do you believe it's a tool?
I think it is a complex tool, but I also do think it is a tool. Yes.
But a tool is something you control. If you do, that's what I said. The Russian roulette was exactly the point, that if you cannot control something, one of the main definitions of a tool is they think that you have the control of it. If you don't, it's not a tool anymore, right? So when you use the word tool, you're just using it periphrastically. It's not really a tool because you cannot control. If you don't predict the results of what you are supposed to be, then you're not in control of it. So therefore, it's not a tool anymore, right?
Are you familiar with John Cage, the composer?
Yeah.
Of course you. Sorry. But you appreciate that aleatoric composition is an ordinary mechanism in formal creative practice. And it's not that every element in the piece is always the same. It's that the system itself is constructed and results in the same work. And the aleatoric processes form part of that work in the same way each time. I think it's similar to that, in my view.
Can I say something related to what Mick was adding before? Because I kind of resonated that I don't know eventually if I'm resonating exactly on the same frequency or on a different part of the spectrum. But and in this related also what Kostas was saying, that when we process information somehow, we have to make a bipartition, but usually, it's better if a multi-partition of the ensemble that we are accessing. And in this sense, there is something extremely important, which is the role of the environment. And there are ways to extract information and encode information in which the environment is essential, because usually the environment is what in quantum information, quantum mechanics provides, basically is the actor that decohere the system. So the coherence up and through a kind of interaction with the environment. And then, I mean, it's because of that, there is a flow of information that can go even around to people, which is a bit also the triangle that, I mean, also Kostas was showing, you know, in his talk. So the flow of information could not be accessed and recognized by anyone if there would not be an environment. And this is a kind of tricky question. Then, I mean, it's has been kind of taking the mind of physicists for 50 years, because it's basically the essence of the Hawking radiation, and I mean the information loss paradox in black hole is all related to that, to the fact that, I mean, as people take into account or not the role of the environment. And it's also a very philosophical question. At the end of the day, it's very epistemological, because can we talk about flow of information between two persons if there's not some witnessing environment in which this flow happens? And I think that even mathematically now, I mean, there are some tools which are a little bit more advanced than taking into account the von Neumann entropy or the Rényi entropy, whatever, for a bipartite system. Now we use multi-partition, like mutual information, no, to account, to access a scrambling, which is basically, I mean, it's the loss of information in the sense.
I'm going to just jump in because I just curious as to, I was so excited by the first half of, well, most of Kostas' talk. It was wonderful because I came to this event with somewhat mystified by how quantum related to the notion of the relationship of human beings to the natural world. And my starting point, I thought, might be difficult to explain, namely that humanity has created systems and expectations of control, science, language, mathematics, and so on. And that in attempting to control nature, we've caused many of the problems that we're now having to confront today. So it's wonderful to hear Kostas explain to me for the first time that the essence of quantum physics and quantum understanding of the world is that, yeah, things are not possible to control in the way that civilized people have tried to do so for several hundred years. But it's now I feel there's a kind of slight regression backwards. So notions of ownership go to me along with notions of control. They're very human specific relationships to reality, that we can control it, and therefore in ownership from the discussion we had earlier. And I think that what I see AI as an enabling situation is to help us move through that notion that we can aspire to control nature to a more kind of collaborative and convivial relationship. As to say that, you know, we are kin with all other nature. We're not separate from them. We're not the masters. We're not their owners. And I don't know whether anybody is. Does that sound like a deviation from the original emphasis of the conference and of our discussion?
Not at all. Quite the opposite. In fact, I would like to ask you, because you're actually my favorite in the. You made a point that actually is the best point by the opposite way. So what I'm noticing is that AI getting better and better than human. Okay, that's what we're noticing. That it's much more powerful because it can do a lot of computation. It has no limits. We are kind of like limited into our own world of history and our own brain kind of structure. We are like kind of limited. We know that. Okay, but the other one is infinite. So it's getting better and better. The question is, if our counter reflection of ourselves, which is the AI, is better than us, why do we need us? In other words, what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there's an old saying that I met the enemy and he is me. And the reason why it's interesting is because the actual sentence that I got from the text manipulation was the opposite of what I thought. I always think of myself as the center. And we all, in the ecological world, we think we are the center. And we are going to provide the solution to the sick nature. The question is that true? Or is it the other way around? But we don't want to know it because we don't want to be told so, because it doesn't fulfill our little agendas that we have. So in a way, I mean, I'm in the quarantine right now, and I'm looking like, and what everybody's saying is that nature is better this way, without humans. In fact, you go outside, the skies are clearer, the animals are having a good time, the birds are flirting around all the time. There is plants are growing everywhere without being destroyed by humans. So, in other words, if there is a better us, why do we need us?
I think we just have to.
Are you advocating that for humans to for there to be harm done to humans? I don't think you are you?
I'm just giving you the natural conclusion of a logical sentence. If that is what you get out of it, that is, but it's not mine. I'm just
okay. I'm just saying, because the notion that humans shouldn't have, shouldn't be protected and considered and thought of as important on the earth, I think is a difficult one. I mean, maybe justified.
I think humans have to get over themselves, but not disappear, is my position. We have to get over the notion that we are above it, outside it, and in charge of it. But it's quite a big ask to learn how to live with other life forms. But that's why I love Kostas talking about his bread. And I'm just equally obsessed by fermentation as a kind of an example in the world today, right now, where people coexist with life forms that they don't understand, you can't see. But there's these new forms of coexistence that are kind of present. And it's just not the presence of, industrial systems or mathematical systems. It's not an alternative, but it's to do with how we have them combining together. That's what I think is exciting. And I have moved from being skeptical of AI as a distraction towards seeing so many examples where AI can be our coach and help us to do better in coexisting with other forms of life.
I do agree. I'm also thinking that, that AI could be used in the best possible way to learn more about our environment and about ecology. It just needs to be, it's always us also using the technology for the best or the worst, as was shown earlier as well. But I do believe that, AI could be helping, of this entanglement that we already have. That's why we also coined the exhibition Entangled Realities, because we are not speaking of something in the future. It's already there. We are already entangled with that machinic systems, but to use them in a way to understand more about other intelligences as well, because we are always centered around our understanding of intelligence. But now we have so much information about plants and animal and these Umwelts. There's not the one, there's so many, and I think that might be something to move forward in the future.
Well, there is a famous myth, the myth of Pygmalion. You probably know about it, which is basically this sort of like trying to become better than yourself. The sculptor who is actually making a statue that is so beautiful that he falls in love with his own creation, and it's better than himself, and he's madly in love with this thing. This is the actual myth, but the myth has a twist at the end, and to make people happy, the gods feel sorry for him. They make the sculpture, the woman, into a real woman. They get married and they live happy ever after. That's not true, okay? Because the real story is different. The real story involves the suicide. The guy kills himself because of the thing that he made. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the actual truth is hidden in the language itself. Pygmalion, the word Pygmalion in Greek means, it's two parts, pygmi and allos. Pygmi is the fist, and allos is the ocean, the water. So it means that, again, these are all mythical figures. These are stories that actually are repeating themselves today. It means that you're hitting against the water. all right? That's impossible. You can never win the water because no matter how much you hit the water, you're never going to get it. In other words, Pygmalion is that he's never going to get what he wants. The woman's name is Galatia, the name of his creation, which means milk. So she is the result of the nurturing of another thing that is not there. So if you put the two things together, you realize that the story of the Pygmalion that we use as our kind of like a, what can I say, an example to be followed, or like a very nice romantic kind of story that, oh yeah, he fell in love with his own thing and then they got married. So therefore he win but twice. First, because he made something, and second, because he married the thing he made. That's not true. The point is that at the end, he loses everything because he wants to exceed himself. And in the process of exceeding ourselves, we create something better than us. And that thing that is better than us hits us back and kills us. That's actually a much more adult and much more mature version of the story than the kids' version that we all believe into. So in that sense, back to Mick's argument and to, I think, Sabine's argument, I saw the marriage, okay? And the marriage is like a man and a human, a human and a woman. I don't know if it's a woman or a man, and there's like the marriage. And my question is, first of all, why are they getting married? What does marriage mean anyway in the first place? Second, why is there humans? I mean, we know about Platonic love. Platonic doesn't have a shape and a form. It's an abstract love. Why is it that we have to always associate ourselves with things? And that is exactly the whole point that I'm trying to make here, that text, language, is the ultimate creation of the other. It's not the shapes, it's not the forms. These are illusory, not the music. All this thing is aesthetics. It's like very nice to the senses, but they don't talk to the mind. The mind is what is the true AI. The AI as in AI intelligence, AI imagination. It's in here, not here. The eyes are very bad ways of looking at the world. So, I mean, that's my, so, and then if it's inconvenient to say that the world is like suffering because of us, I'm sorry, it is. It's a true statement. I cannot hide it because we are destroying the world. I mean, that's the, John can attest to that. If I'm wrong.
but I think the fact that you're pointing to your mind as being some kind of entity in your head is a big part of the problem. I think we can overcome that. I'll just give you a practical example about when AI has taught me to think differently about my relationship to living things. I guess many people here go through forests in the autumn and kick dead leaves. It's just a nice, many of us have done that. I've done that all my life. When I saw the work of this scientist, Julian Lieber, who analyzes and visualizes the hi-fi traveling through the kind of layer of the earth underneath the dead leaves, that just completely, it blew my mind, but it mainly in the way that I suddenly realized that there's life all around me in that forest, which for all my many years I'd never realized before. So that's where I find, you feel something special in a forest filled with dead leaves or dying and decomposing leaves, but not quite knowing why. Now, thanks to AI as a kind of, and science as a coach and a prompt, my whole experience is different. And I just hope that can be done on a, for many people in similar ways.
Could I possibly respond to that and perhaps offer a middle way? I'd say two things. The first one is, I think that ideas about the particular nature of awareness and consciousness and that we've been talking about, they've actually, and certainly some of the ones that I mentioned in my talk, they've been used to advocate for animal awareness and have led to animal rights legislation in Europe, which has had a big impact on farming in Europe. And it's the same researchers who I mentioned in my talk who have been pioneering that work. And their fundamental approach has been, well, humans consider themselves to be over the animals because of their consciousness. Actually, our way of looking at it allows us to be seen at the same level, to have and for animal awareness to be thought of in a way which is similar to human awareness. And I think that that's as a result of this, of defining what awareness might be better. And I think that those are the same people who say that it can't be computed, right? So they're the same people. That's the first thing. So I think that there's a way, if you can be very clear about your definitions, you can deal with ownership, rights, etc., in a way which makes the planet better. And I think that's the angle that I'm coming from. I'm not trying to say, hey, we need to think about our bread. I'm saying, we need to think about the world as it is. And that brings me to my second point, which is that unlike you, Kostas, I'm fundamentally inspired by materiality. Material things are the things I focus mostly on. And those are for philosophical reasons. And all the work I'm engaged in is about understanding and operating with material. And I think that is because, although the mind, fascinating as it is and crucial as it is an ever-present part of all that we do, the material things concern me more. I worry about the nature of our material existence and the material existence of us on this planet. And I feel that, and that's the position, to have clarity about those things brings greater freedoms. And so that, I think that's a kind of, I'm trying to propose a middle way of seeing these different ideas, pointing in the same direction.
True. In fact, you actually made that clear. I was very happy to hear when you said that you do believe that AI is the inventor. You said that, and I kind of thought about it as you actually pertain to the theory that ideas are discovered. So when you say that the rules of the society, there's two ways to look into the rules, like who owns what and who is the author of something and who is all these things are either seen as inventions that we invent, so we are in control of making the decision about what is the rules that we're going to put in the society, or you can go the other way around and say that it's a discovery. It's about rules that exist beyond us, that there is rules of, let's say, justice, fairness, that are not ours. We don't make these rules. We are actually addressing these things in this sense. In that sense, you have the idea of ownership of an animal is not something that we decide, but it's been decided by us, by others beyond us. It's because it is, let's say, religious. It is because it is something that is philosophical in nature, something that is not our personal opinion about it. And then I'm with you, because then we're talking about the same idea, that then if that's the case, then the algorithm is also a thing that owns something, has a right beyond our not understanding it, because it doesn't look like a human. So therefore, how can it possibly have the rights?
I think that's not what I wouldn't say that. I couldn't agree with that. I would say, and fundamentally that's because I'll give you another example as to why. I think there is some fantastic work going on in artificial intelligent machines, particularly robots. So there are some robots that use brain tissue, organoids, cerebral organoids. Have you heard of these cerebral organoids? And the idea is that these are made out of brain tissue and that they are connected to robots. And then those are very, very successful because they use actual living tissue. It's not just because, it's for a lot of reasons. There's now a moratorium on research in those fields because no one can be sure whether those cerebral organoids, brain-based devices, are or are not aware. And that is more of a significant issue for me than whether or not a machine, an algorithm which I authored in a computer is aware. I think those two things can't have parity. I think they're not on the same level. I'm not saying that there will never be a time when computation won't lead to something aware that can be an author. I'm saying, meanwhile, there are humans who are having their rights removed and their ownership of their own things are being removed and their sense of identity is being erased. And that's a problem. And I'm concerned about that. And, and scientists who are developing robots are deeply concerned about even the smallest brain-based devices that have organic components. They're like the famous British science fiction creature, the Dalek. They're very similar to that. So, they're not really like that, but you see my point. So I think that I would say that even then, I'm more concerned with the rights of things I already believed to be alive.
Okay, so I don't know, Sissi, is there any questions from the audience that is that you have for?
Yes, I'm collecting. Probably you can, because today our panel sort of like finish around 6 p.m. So I think probably you can have 5 more minutes to have the discussion. Then I collect all the information, then send it to you. And also there are some QA box. There are some questions in the QA box. I also will collect them.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, please. Yeah, so since I am the panel and the panelists at the same time, I would like to ask a question to myself and to you. And the question that I have is, again, pertinent to the whole idea of artificial imagination, okay? We're talking not AI, artificial imagination. What do you think about mistakes? How do you understand a mistake? What is a mistake to you? Sabine, what is a mistake to you?
A mistake is probably something unexpected happening. I don't know if there's such a thing as a mistake. It just never turned out the way that we might have envisioned it.
So when you make a mistake, do you get an insight into it? I mean, there are mistakes that are bad and there are mistakes that are good. I mean, a mistake can kill you, but a mistake can actually save your life, right? And yet, none of which is under your control because it's a mistake. So,
I mean, hopefully we make, we have insights from the mistakes that we make, yeah, I would say. I mean, of course, when you put it that way, you know, that a mistake can kill you, yes, that would be a worst case scenario, but from everything else, I would really say it also has a chance of a learning curve.
So if we abandon the real world and we get into the world of imagination, which is the mental world, what if a mistake there? What happens there? You don't get killed in a mistake that is in a mental state, but somehow a mistake can inspire you to come up with a new idea, right?
I mean, that was, it's not talking about mistakes, but when we, the example that I showed of the AI that we trained to help us curatorially, kind of like placing the scenography, it was surprising, you know, the outcome was something that we never thought of, because this kind of thinking, like I'm doing an exhibition, I build a wall and I see a wall or a box for things to place in. And then what was inspiring was that, of course, this algorithm had no understanding of a box. It just had these simple elements that it positioned randomly. And that was for me like an amazing moment when I realized, oh, wow, you know, we can do whatever we want. I would never have come up with that idea to create walls that are not, you know, that are so random. And actually what happened was that the audience said to us, wow, this is the best scenography ever, you know, because it was so dynamic. It was a different flow of the exhibition space. And I think that, yeah, that was super interesting. And I think that was also my point in the presentation, that it's really that entanglement together, you know, not this oppositioning models of human against the machine, but human with machine, you know, can change things for the better.
It's interesting, this question of yours, Kostas, because so mistake, if we want to see it from a point of view which is literal, is something which is not taken how it should be taken eventually. Does not adhere to some paradigm that we have, you know, some orthodoxy in terms of, you know, the right view. in this sense, mistakes are extremely useful because they prove ourselves against a framework which we can then revert. So mistakes are eventually occasionally given. So there may be fluctuations in a certain sense, randomly distributed, and they are a great opportunity in this sense because allow to change mind and then to create something new.
Mm.
I'm sorry I missed the discussion after Professor Fabricini yesterday because he talked about the difficulty of talking about reason and predictability separately from common sense, which I think he probably is talking about embodied reason and embodied perception. So for me, a perception is an event, and then different people will then see that whether it's a predictable or a desirable event, and they give it a name such as mistake. But maybe, Kostas, you could tell me, were you there yesterday for that discussion? Well, how far did you go down the road of what does common sense mean in this context?
Well, what Filippo was trying to say, and again, Antonino can attest to that, he was actually bringing the analogy of the crooked coin. In other words, he was saying like, if a mistake is a mistake, it is because it is referenced to a canon, to a normal state, right? So it's a mistake because it's not what it's supposed to be. So if you reverse the two things and everything is a mistake, then when you make a mistake, you're not a mistake, you're telling the truth because you're doing the opposite of the opposite. So in other words, when you flip a coin, okay, and it goes up and down, you have a 50-50 chance of something happening, right? I mean, it's going to go this way or that way, it's 50-50, and the more chances you do, the more you have it. But if the coin is like off, if the machine is, let's say, chains like not working properly, then you have a chance of going the other side. So it means that you have to actually move the whole system to be tilted so that it will be this way, and that's 50-50. So the idea behind it is that an accident is not an accident anymore. That's basically, I mean, I don't know, Antonino, go ahead.
Somehow you can recast everything you said, totally resonate. Also thinking that in a certain sense, since every mistake can be seen and regarded as a possibility, we can think that, this is actually what happens, for instance, in quantum mechanics. In quantum mechanics, a trajectory, which is, let's say, we can consider as the real trajectory in classical mechanics, is basically the semi-classical path. Any other path would be just false because it does not minimize the action, the classical action. So does not is not adiabatic in this sense. But in quantum mechanics, also the other paths are available, and actually we can even measure a probability, an amplitude for this path to take part, let's say, to the final sum. So what was impossible and what was a mistake now becomes part of a possibility, and actually we could even revert, and we can even think that for every path that we can imagine, we can associate a theory, which is basically its model, or if you want, is the organon, let's say, that somehow classify that path as the real one. So we can even construct theory out of mistakes, in which the mistakes becomes the model.
Right.
I will just add one thing, which is that in my past career as a jazz guitarist and drummer, mistakes were essential to good outcomes. And that notion of embodied interaction with something in order to unconsciously allow things to emerge as part of your performance, that's essential. I think it's a beautiful part of how humans create.
And when I say mistake, I use also, inadvertently, you can use accidents, glitches, even nonsense in a way, nonsense that is actually sensical nonsense. Like if something that appears to be a mistake before it's been studied to find out that really it was the right thing, but we thought it was a mistake before it happened. And the whole idea is not, and again, I said there are good mistakes and there are bad mistakes. There are good mistakes in jazz and there are bad mistakes that can kill you. And there's good mistakes that actually could open a world into a beautiful world of imagination. Again, artificial imagination. I'm not talking about our imagination, but about the artificial, the thing that has a mind of its own. And somehow it looks like it's a mistake. We look like something is wrong in this whole thing, but really at the end of the day, we are the one who are wrong, not that. And that sort of mistake is, I think, where the artificial imagination starts to emerge. It's almost like a little voyeurism into like another world where you look a mistake and you look through it and you say, wow, there's something going on in the other side. And this is the only way to see it because that's where the light came out from the other side. And that's a very kind of like to us, I mean, to Filippo and me, because that's the conference theme, if you like, but it's also like the kind of papers that we're writing right now. And the whole idea of the exhibition that we're trying to put together is exactly that is going to be a guiding force. The nonsense that we think is not like it's almost like a neo-Dada kind of thing. Dada came from mistakes that human made intentionally. You try to make a mistake because when you didn't make a mistake, the world was worse. The whole point of Dada was that because we made sense, the world happened and everyone got destroyed. So it's better not to make any sense at all. But they could not make a mistake. They couldn't make no sense through a machine. They used themselves. Look, they become like nonsensical as humans. I try to be like hallucinate myself. But now we have a machine. We have a thing that is thinking. So now the data, the nonsense comes from the machine itself. So we can actually look into the machine as a solution to our problems. Because the way that we think right now is wrong. Look what happens to the world today. Everything is wrong. But somehow the solution may be in the other side of sense, which is in the artificial sense, in the artificial intelligence or in the artificial imagination in that sense. So that's kind of like where we're trying to put the whole twist of this conference. And again, I'm talking now as a panelist and as a responder to my own questions. But again, this is the whole idea that we try to go beyond the common sense, to find a metaphor beyond common sense. Common sense doesn't work, and it's been misused in ways, at least from our perspective. And that's why we're trying to invent a new technology. And that was the experiments that I did in my little confinement monk environment that I'm living right now. Again, the key word being distancing. You're distancing yourself from yourself in a strange way, using any kind of. So, Sissy, is there any
yes.
questions?
Because, and I saw the message from John, and he may have to leave us because, And also, there are several questions from the audiences. One question is for Mick. So why would you like to explore materiality in artificial intelligence? That's for you.
I think that similar reasons to that which Kostas was talking about in some ways. I think that the creative potential of many creative AI systems themselves allows for this reconstitution and recombination, which you find in Dada. And I think that, and it's no surprise that the art systems that people are using a lot these days are named after Dada and surrealist artists, for example, DALL-E 1 and 2. And this is large companies like OpenAI who are acknowledging the influence of surrealism in the output and the construction of their work. And there is a strong relationship between materialism and what those movements became. And I think that there's I think the notion that you are working with material, with actual found material, embedded inside feature representations of an artificially intelligent system, that notion is compelling as an artist, in the same way that you might construct your own database in the way that Lev Manovich did 20 years ago, or other artists have done, and then construct these random aleatoric artworks. That way, what a lot of artists are doing instead now is looking at a model which contains massive information, material, representations, and recombining them in lots of ways in a highly accelerated fashion. And I think that's a wholly material concern, because it's exploring the combinations of ideas and juxtapositions. The notion of juxtaposition as a creative resource has been explored by so many artists, and it's a core part of this art form at the moment. When you were talking before, Kostas, you reminded me of Brian Eno's oblique strategies, where you just have like a card, and the card has something written on it, and then you have to do something in response. Well, recently, one of our students, just like an MSc student, took the oblique strategies cards and fed them into ClipSpace and produced a whole bunch of artworks from Disco Diffusion based on that. But that's because they know there's a relationship between the text on those and the text which has been mined materially from all of the material which is on the internet, and that those things will then come back and be projected. And indeed, that's what happened. I had another student who recently made a version of the film Koyaanisqatsi by analyzing, it's a great student actually, Luís Arandas, who's staying with us, he's a Portuguese. He made a version of Koyaanisqatsi by analyzing the images in Koyaanisqatsi using a GPT, and then used those GPT prompts to generate a new version of the film with Disco Diffusion. And when you're watching his new version, you can see the original. It's being reinterpreted. So I think that is a material concern. I think it's to do with the nature of material, and it's to do with the material in the models and all of the human creative ingenuity which is in those models. And it's to do with humans as material, us as perceptual, meaning-making machines. I don't mean to cast us just as machines. We're not, but but then there's a way in which we are designed to predict and make meaning of the world, and we do it badly, and that's beautiful, right? And I think that whole relationship, that exploration, is extremely exciting. I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, great.
Okay, thank you. And also another question. Let me check. I think it's like the topic of Kostas, or the discussions remind the audience set of Heidegger's statement about in-handedness and up-handedness, and they would like to know: do you have these words in mind? Kostas?
Oh, for me? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Say again, what the Heidegger's?
It's the statement about in-handedness.
That sign?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because there are only two words, sort of like in-handedness, up-handedness. I'm not sure if German. You know that. Okay, so probably I exchange to another question is that there is one statement is that because we use pen or tools to express, right? And when you are not good at it, you sort of like lost control. And when we mention about AI as a tool, or it probably means that, or if you, let me check how to say that, sort of like if you lost of the control, probably because of not good at. You are not good at the tools. That's why you lost control.
At the tours?
Yeah, for instance, like I think the topic is similar to the discussion between you and Pascal last month. Like when we have to learn drawing or painting, we have to do many practice. then you can express yourself properly, right? And it's similar to using AI. And when you are not good at it, probably you lost the control and you cannot sort of like express yourself.
Well, Mick is playing jazz, and the more he loses control, the more people are like celebrating, right?
Yes,
that's
probably
the moment that the jazz guy goes out of control, and everybody's like happy because he's not actually following the rule. That's the whole point. But that's the human world. Again, we have to distinguish the human from the artificial. Different things, completely different things. And I said before, it's the opposites in a way. It's a complementary kind of thing. So what is in the one world is a advantage, is a disadvantage of the other one. So for example, a mistake, a lack of control in our world is a bad thing. I mean, you're driving a car, you're out of control, that's not good, right? But in another world, the artificial world, where the machine is out of control, okay, it's a different thing. And again, we don't know exactly what. We don't know how it works because this is the very beginning of the whole odyssey that we're going through in order to get into that other side of the world. And but we have a few little indications. Every now and then we see things that actually reminds us, like Mick said earlier about the car. I mean, who is responsible for the accident of the Uber car, okay? Or who is responsible for the credit that is being taken for the obvious painting, okay? These are like things that are just starting to become important. Today, I was reading in the news, like a woman was raped in the metaverse. I mean, like, what are you talking about? This is something that is new. We don't know exactly what they are, but they're glitches. They're little, as I said, voyeurist holes into the black wall that we have in front of us. And on the other side, which is the side of the object, is the other side that we're not the subjects. They are the subjects. They're talking to us. We exist because they think of us, which is the actual statement that I got from my random reshuffling of the text. That world is visible to us through little holes right now. And the more time passes by, the more we actually start seeing these things happening. And we start to appreciate them, not because of what they are, but what they mean for us. We learn from these things. We understand who we are and what they are as it, the thing. That those things have a mind of their own, okay? And that includes everything. I mean, even the machine that we use today, we have already a computer in front of us. How many times have we actually fallen in love with our computer? I mean, it is a machine, it's a thing. And yet it has its own existence. It has its own, in a way, facilitating personality. It is our friend. It is the one that we cannot leave. You know, you take your cell phone, right? It is something that you have to have it all the time with you. You love it. It is a thing. And yet it is not. Because we see something in it. We see a reflection of ourselves in it. And this is exactly the whole argument. So the lack of control is not a bad thing at all. In fact, the more out of control we are, the better it is. Again, mentally speaking. I mean, I'm not getting into the material world. Mick would disagree with me. He doesn't want to kill anybody. He doesn't want to get killed because that's the material world. But in the mental world, we're allowed to do anything we want. We can dream. We can fathom. We can conjecture. And we can actually make mistakes. We can actually make opposite, contradiction. We can contradict ourselves. And that's a good thing. That's what I did this week. I was contradicting myself all the time, which I don't do it on a human world, but in the machine world, it worked perfectly. If I didn't contradict myself, I wouldn't have come up with any of the experiments that I did. I've been ambivalent. I've been amphibulous. I've been making no sense. These are things that are very good. This is the inspiration that we have. This is the first time that we have this ability, and we should actually cherish it.
Okay. Last question for Sabine is that in terms of ethic judgments, what is the difference between AI artwork and other forms of artwork?
Mm-hmm. I think that most AI artworks that we see are the decisions of the artists who have created or working with the AI. For example, the image of obvious that we've seen the predecessor images of Robbie Barrett who trained the AI. And it's actually the decision of the artist group or of Robbie Barrett, which one they are then releasing as an artwork they think is worth doing it. And even now, Mario Klingemann, an artist that I mentioned as well, with the uncanny mirror piece, he created a bot that, and he said, like, for him, an artist is someone who needs to earn his own money. So this bot is creating artworks that are released, but it's not the AI who decides, but it's the public. They kind of vote for what some of the outcomes that are then released as an NFT. So I think that's, at the moment, at least, there's really no difference, because it's really the artist who makes the decisions of what is released as an artwork, would be my answer.
Okay, thank you.
So, Sissy, I will allow you to close the ceremony.
Yeah, okay. Now, so far, our 4 sessions are finished. So thank you all the speakers' engagement, and also thank you again for the participating. Thank you all the audiences. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.